The laboratory is kept at a constant 18 degrees Celsius. Any fluctuation, any warmth, and the past begins to rot. I stand over the microscope, observing the crackler on a 17th century oil painting. The cracks are microscopic, jagged, a map of structural failure. Most people look at a painting and see beauty. I look at it, and I see decay. My parents were also flawed works of art. They adored the glossy, vibrant finish of my sister Isabella, but they loathed the one who had to scrub away the filth beneath the surface. Betrayal. Much like chemical corrosion, it requires time to manifest. It starts in the shadows, and it eats until there is nothing left but a hollow frame. I do not feel anger. Anger is an impurity. I feel the cold, sharp clarity of a final assessment. The studio in Florence was my sanctuary. It was filled with the scent of turpentine, lead white, and the heavy, sweet aroma of oxidation. 8 years ago, it burned. The fire was mysterious, they said. A tragic accident of frayed wires and old wood. My grandmother's entire legacy, 12 priceless sketches using a lost fumato technique, supposedly turned into gray dust. My parents did not mourn the art. They mourned the interruption to our family's social standing. While the embers were still glowing, they sat me down. The room smelled of smoke and expensive scotch. "Clara, you have your studies in Paris," my father said. His voice was a gavel strike. "You are young. You can start over. But Isabella needs this moment to lead the family's rebirth. We need her to be the face of the Preston name." Isabella stood behind them, her eyes red from practiced tears. She was the masterpiece. I was the scrap of canvas. I did not cry. Tears are a waste of hydration, an inefficient response to a logical fraud. I walked into the ruins of the studio. The floor was a sea of black carbon. I knelt among the wreckage and picked up a single, charred fragment of paper. I held it under a portable magnifying lens. The texture was wrong. A real sketch, my grandmother's sketches, would have left traces of heavy graphite and silver point. This was blank. This was cheap, modern pulp. The fire was a script. A poorly executed performance. I realized then that my parents hadn't lost the art. They had hidden it. They were liquidating my future to fund Isabella's vanity. They assumed I was too clinical, too detached, to notice the lack of pigment in the ash. I stood up. I brushed the soot from my white coat. "You want me to leave?" I asked. My voice was a level, horizontal line. "It's for the best, Clara," my mother whispered. She tried to touch my cheek. I stepped back. "I will leave," I said. "But remember, every fake layer eventually cracks. I will return when the paint on your lips begins to peel." I walked out into the Florence rain. I did not look back at the smoke. I began to calculate the interest on their debt. The spring was compressed. The isolation had begun. I was no longer a daughter. I was the auditor of their sins. And the reckoning was just beginning. 8 years of absolute silence. To a human, it is an eternity of resentment. To a system, it is merely the necessary duration of a thorough investigation. I did not spend those years in exile. I spent them in the archives. I became a ghost in the halls of the Uffizi Gallery, the leading authority on the chemical signatures of the Renaissance. While the world marveled at the brushstrokes of masters, I was analyzing the isotopes of their pigments. I was not just restoring art. I was auditing the lives of those who thought they had deleted me. Every morning, I checked the ledgers. Every evening, I tracked the news. I watched my family's digital footprint like a predator tracking a blood trail in the snow. The contrast was clinical. Isabella lived in a storm of noise. She was the visionary of the century. Her life was a chaotic montage of vintage wine, flashbulbs, and the hollow adoration of people who cannot distinguish a masterpiece from a high-resolution lie. She spent millions on villas in Tuscany, while the foundation of her genius was nothing more than a stolen sketch from a sister she assumed was dead. I lived in the discipline of the milligram. I spent my hours in a sterilized lab, measuring the exact weight of lapis lazuli, the precise viscosity of linseed oil. I worked in the quiet. I worked in the cold. She was the explosion of a firework. I was the steady, slow cooling of the earth. He met my mother at a privated gala near the Piazza della Signoria. The room was a vacuum of silk and arrogance. I stood in the corner, wearing a tailored charcoal suit. I did not need to speak. My presence was a structural anomaly in their perfect evening. She approached me, her eyes widening, her hand flying to the diamond necklace that rested against her throat. A constellation of stolen light. "Clara?" she whispered. Her voice was a fragile, cracked thing. You look so different. We thought, we thought you were happy in Paris." "I was busy," I replied. My voice was a level, horizontal strike. She tried to smile. She touched her necklace, the stones glittering with the greed of a decade. "Isabella is about to change the world, Clara. This necklace, your father bought it to celebrate the upcoming auction at Palazzo Pitti. It's a new era for the family name." I looked at the diamonds. I didn't see jewelry. I saw a forensic record. "The clarity of these stones is statistically perfect," I said. My gaze shifted to her eyes. "But the provenance is bon. It is stained by the friction of a fraud that is reaching its limit." She stiffened. "You were always so dramatic, Clara. This is success. We have finally arrived." "No, Mother," I said. My tone was an icy, clinical verdict. "You call this success. I call this a debt that has been accruing interest for 8 years, and the bank is now open for collection. The spring is now compressed to the point of structural failure. The art world is trembling. Tomorrow, at the Palazzo Pitti, Isabella will auction her magnum opus, The Rebirth. Starting bid, €50 million. They tell the press it is a divine inspiration. They tell the collectors it is the soul of a new master." I sit in my darkened lab, 5 blocks away from the palace. The screen in front of me does not show the painting's beauty. It shows the anatomy of its lie. I am looking at a high-resolution, X-ray, fluorescence, spectrograph. I painted the Rebirth when I was 22, but I did not just use oil and pigment. I was young, I was careful, and I was suspicious. I zoom in on the monitor. Under the infrared light, beneath the layers of Isabella's arrogant, fraudulent signature, the truth emerges. Red dots. Microscopic. Biological. Years ago, I mixed a single drop of my grandmother's DNA, a strand of hair pulverized into the lead white primer, into the very fabric of the canvas. It is a biological watermark, a signature of blood that no solvent can ever erase. I see the molecules. I see the signature. Isabella thinks she owns the stage. My parents think they own the profit. They do not realize that I am sitting here, sipping cold tea, watching the molecules of their destruction align in the dark. The grand ballroom of the Palazzo Pitti is a cathedral of curated greed. Thousands of elite collectors, their eyes fixed on the stage with a feverish intensity, are watching the countdown of a lie. Isabella stands at the podium, draped in white silk, basking in the roar of the applause. The bidding for the Rebirth has reached €55 million. My parents sit in the front row, their faces flushed with the wine of a victory they did not earn. I enter through the heavy oak doors. I do not wear a gala dress. I do not wear a mask. I wear a tailored obsidian suit. I do not shout. I walk down the center aisle with the rhythmic, heavy precision of a ticking clock. In my left hand, I carry a compact, industrial, infrared spectrometer. The auctioneer pauses. The room falls into a sudden, brittle silence. I reach the foot of the stage. Isabella's smile does not just fade, it evaporates. "Stop the bidding," I say. My voice is not loud, but it carries the absolute authority of a verdict. This transaction is based on a structural falsehood. "Clara? Security! Get this! This technician out of here!" Isabella screams. I do not move. I reach for the hall's lighting controls. A backdoor access I secured an hour ago. The house lights plunge into darkness. I activate the spectrometer. A beam of high-intensity infrared light cuts through the shadows, hitting the center of the masterpiece. "Art is a forensic record," I state, my voice cutting through the gasps of the audience. "Paint is just a layer. The truth always lies beneath." Under the infrared scan, the vibrant oils of Isabella's genius become transparent on the massive digital screens behind the stage. The underpainting emerges. There, beneath the stolen inspiration, is the original sketch. It is infused with the biological ink, the DNA signature I mixed in Florence 8 years ago. Across the center of the canvas, glowing blood red under the spectrum, is my name. It is not a signature. It is a permanent microscopic brand. Isabella lunges toward me, her face contorted into a mask of primal, unhinged rage. "You traitor!" she screams, her voice bouncing off the gilded walls like a shattered vase. "You're trying to kill my career. You're nothing. You're just a restorer." I stand perfectly still. My pulse is a steady 60. I look at her with the cold, clinical detachment of a terminal. "Do not raise your voice, Isabella. Noise is merely the expression of logical impotence. You were not betrayed by me. You were purged by your own emptiness. Art can be forged, but the signature of the soul is immutable." I turn to my parents. They look like statues made of ash. I place high black folders on the velvet-covered table. "The debt is now due," I state. My tone is professional, devoid of heat. "You have two paths. Choose quickly, before the authorities finalize the arrest warrant. Path A." I point to the first folder. "You sign a full confession. You testify that Isabella manipulated the estate and committed international art fraud. You keep the title to the old Florence workshop. Isabella goes to prison for 10 years. My mother gasps. A sharp, broken sob. Path B. I continue. You protect her. You lie. And by tomorrow morning, every offshore account, every car, and the villa in Cap Ferrat will be seized. I have already purchased your debt through 3 separate investment funds. You will be homeless, and Isabella will still be a felon. Decide." My father looks at the screens, then at the pens. He looks at the screaming chaos of the auction hall where Isabella is being surrounded by security. He does not hesitate. He picks up the pen. He signs Path A. My mother follows. They chose the workshop over the daughter. Logic always wins over sentiment when the bank account is empty. The police officers move through the crowd, their heavy boots a rhythmic thud against the marble. They take Isabella by the arms. She is weeping now, a jagged, pathetic sound. My parents stand in the corner, clutching their folders, realizing they are no longer the elite. They are just debtors, living on my mercy. I do not offer a hug. I do not offer a goodbye. I simply adjust the ring on my finger. I check my watch. The restoration is complete. I am walking along the water. The lights of Florence reflect off the Seine, creating a shimmering, distorted version of the world. The air is cold. The silence is perfect. I look at the dark water. The ripples move in a steady, predictable pattern. Every old painting requires a restorer to return it to its true value. My family was no different. I didn't destroy them. I didn't set out to burn their world. I simply removed the fake layers. I put them back where they belong, in the shadows, beneath the frame. I am Clara, and the truth is the only thing left on the canvas.